Strength isn't built in moments of comfort. It's forged in the relentless fires of challenge. Every setback, every trial, every moment where you feel the weight of the world pressing in is not just a test, it's an opportunity for transformation at the deepest level of your mind and spirit. Stress is often seen as an enemy, something to be avoided at all costs. Yet in the design of the human mind and body, it carries within it the seeds of our greatest growth. When pressure mounts, when circumstances press hard against us, the brain is not simply breaking down, it is rewiring, reshaping, and fortifying itself for the challenges ahead. This process, built into the very fabric of our neurobiology, is not accidental. It is purposeful. From the moment a stressful event is perceived, a cascade of changes begins deep within the brain. The amygdala, ever vigilant, sounds the alarm, and in response, the hypothalamus signals the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. While these chemicals can overwhelm if left unchecked, in the right doses they sharpen awareness, quicken reactions, and prime the body for action. In moments of trial, the mind shifts into a heightened state of readiness, an ancient survival system now serving a modern purpose to prepare you not only to endure, but to adapt. In this pressure cooker of challenge, something remarkable happens in the neural architecture. The brain, through a process called neuroplasticity, begins to forge new pathways, strengthening connections that allow for better problem solving, faster adaptation, and a steadier emotional state. Like a blacksmith shaping metal in the fire, each wave of stress bends and tempers the mind, creating a vessel capable of holding more without breaking. This is why those who have walked through trials often emerge with a quiet strength. Their minds have been trained by the very storms that threaten to undo them. But this strengthening is not automatic. It requires intentional engagement. Without it, stress corrodes. With it, stress constructs. It becomes the raw material from which resilience is built. Science confirms what the soul already senses. The human brain grows through struggle. Controlled exposure to challenge stimulates the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought and emotional regulation, enhancing the ability to make wise decisions under pressure. Simultaneously, the hippocampus, vital for memory and learning, is fortified, allowing past experiences to become reservoirs of wisdom rather than prisons of fear. Even the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, the accelerator and brake pedals of your internal state becomes more refined, enabling you to face future storms with both readiness and peace. The very systems that seem to shake under the weight of stress are the ones being strengthened by it, as if the creator himself embedded in our biology a blueprint for unbreakable character. Yet this transformation is not passive. It demands that you lean into discomfort rather than flee from it. It means seeing challenges not as walls, but as weights, each one an opportunity to lift a little heavier, to push a little further, to expand the capacity of mind and spirit. This is where faith and neuroscience converge, for just as the brain requires repeated exposure to challenge to grow, the soul requires repeated acts of trust to deepen. Every trial is both a test and a training ground, and each moment of perseverance is another brick in the fortress of resilience you are building within. In the middle of the struggle, it is tempting to wish it away, to plead for immediate relief. But like a muscle that grows only when torn and rebuilt, the mind gains strength through the tension of resistance. In the deliberate choice to endure, to engage, and to adapt, you are not just surviving stress. You are being shaped into someone who cannot be shaken. Fear has a way of taking root in the mind, sending silent signals through the nervous system that shape how we think, act, we think, act, and even who we believe ourselves to be. It can start with a single thought, a whisper of a what if, and before long, it can dominate the pathways of the brain, carving ruts of anxiety and hesitation that seem impossible to escape. Yet neuroscience reveals that fear, though powerful, is not permanent. Fearful is not permanent. The brain is not a fixed structure. It is a living network constantly rewiring itself in response to what we focus on, repeat, and believe. This means that fear, no matter how deeply entrenched, can be dismantled through deliberate practice, renewed focus, and disciplined thought. Every time we face a fear rather than avoid it, neurons fire in new patterns, weakening the old circuits of dread and strengthening new circuits of courage. Over time, the brain learns a different rhythm, one not ruled by panic, but by clarity. When fear is left unchecked, it triggers a chain reaction in the body. The amygdala sends its alarm, the hypothalamus responds, and stress hormones flood the bloodstream, sharpening reflexes but clouding higher reasoning. This was useful when danger meant a predator in the wild, but in modern life, fear often hijacks the mind in situations where courage is required instead of flight. The key lies in training the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reason, planning, and self-control, to override the automatic impulses of fear. This doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we practice reframing threats, grounding ourselves in truth, and deliberately exposing ourselves to controlled challenges. Each time we do, the brain learns. There is a deep connection between what we dwell on and the emotional state our body inhabits. Faith-based resilience teaches that fear thrives where faith is absent, and science affirms that thought patterns directly sculpt neural architecture. If we dwell continually on fear-filled scenarios, we reinforce those pathways. If we choose instead to meditate on truth, hope, and possibility, we lay down tracks of resilience that the brain will default to under pressure. This is not wishful thinking. It is neurobiological training. What is neurobiological training? Through repetition, the default mode network of the brain begins to quiet its fear-based chatter, and the circuits of confidence grow stronger. Fear becomes not an overwhelming wave, but a signal, an indicator that growth is at hand. In this way, fear can be transformed from an enemy into a teacher. It points us toward the very areas where our growth is needed most. By stepping into the discomfort instead of retreating, we give the mind the chance to rewire itself and the spirit the chance to expand. Every confrontation with fear is an opportunity to write a new story in the brain, one in which you are not the captive, but the conqueror. Pain is often seen as an enemy, something to be avoided at all costs. Yet within the architecture of the human nervous system, pain is a messenger, loud, persistent, and deeply purposeful. The brain is wired to respond to pain as a signal for change, adaptation, and survival. Physical pain alerts us to injury, but emotional and mental pain, though less tangible, operates with the same neurological principle. It directs our attention to areas that require healing, growth, or redirection. The trouble is, most people run from pain, numb it, or distract themselves until it becomes buried deep within the subconscious, where it quietly influences choices and shapes identity. But neuroscience reveals that pain, when faced deliberately, can forge resilience in ways comfort never can. The human brain has a remarkable capacity for neuroplasticity, the ability to change and rewire itself in response to repeated experiences. This means the way we respond to pain becomes part of our mental blueprint. If we respond with avoidance, we train the brain to fear discomfort and to retreat at the first sign of difficulty. If we respond with engagement, meeting pain with curiosity, resolve, and purpose, we teach the brain that hardship is not an ending, but a threshold. Over time, this rewiring turns endurance into instinct, allowing us to operate with stability even under extreme pressure. This is the foundation of becoming unbreakable, not the absence of pain, but mastery over how it shapes us. Pain activates the same neural circuits that regulate memory and emotion, particularly within the hippocampus and amygdala. This is why moments of deep struggle are etched so vividly in our minds, but it is also why those moments can become turning points. When we reframe pain, not as punishment but as preparation, we activate different cognitive networks, reducing the emotional charge and increasing our capacity to act with clarity. This transformation is magnified when paired with spiritual conviction, because the mind is no longer left to interpret pain alone. It is anchored to a higher meaning, one that transcends the immediate discomfort. In a world obsessed with ease and instant gratification, the ability to embrace pain as a teacher is rare, yet it is the very thing that builds mental and spiritual armor. Every trial becomes a forge, every setback a sharpening stone. The nervous system learns through repeated exposure that pain is survivable, that it can be endured and even harnessed. And as this understanding deepens, the threshold for breaking rises higher and higher until the very situations that once shattered you become the very fuel that strengthens you. Fear is one of the most primal forces hardwired into the human brain, an ancient survival mechanism designed to keep us alive in the face of real danger. Deep within the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm center, fear triggers a cascade of chemical signals. Adrenaline surges, the heart races and muscles tense, preparing us to either fight, flee, or freeze. This response is vital when facing genuine threats. Yet in modern life, most of the fears we battle are not predators in the dark, but thoughts in our mind. These imagined dangers, fear of failure, rejection, loss, or the unknown, ignite the same neural pathways as a physical threat, keeping the body in a constant state of tension and the mind shackled in hesitation. The problem is not that fear exists, but that it has become a ruler rather than a servant, someone. When fear governs decision-making, it distorts perception, shrinks opportunity, and confines potential. The brain, through repetition, learns to associate unfamiliar situations with danger, even when no real threat exists. Over time, this conditioning makes fear the default state, and courage feels unnatural. Yet neuroscience shows us that fear can be rewired, that the amygdala's overactivity can be calmed, and that the prefrontal cortex, the brain's center of reason and strategy, can be strengthened to override impulsive, fear-based reactions. This rewiring doesn't come through avoiding fear, but through deliberate exposure to the very challenges we dread. Each time you act in the presence of fear, you create new neural connections that signal safety where the brain once screened danger. The threshold begins to shift. What was once terrifying becomes tolerable, and what was tolerable becomes empowering. This process is magnified when grounded in spiritual truth, because faith reframes fear entirely not as an enemy to escape, but as an indicator that you are stepping into territory that demands growth. Fear stops being a wall and becomes a doorway. When fear arises, the body may react with trembling hands, a racing pulse, or shortness of breath. But these are not signs of weakness. They are evidence that your body is readying itself for action. The choice lies in whether to retreat or to advance. Every time you advance, you teach your nervous system that fear does not dictate your path. Over time, you build a mental and spiritual immunity to intimidation, standing firm where you once would have crumbled. In this way, fear loses its sting, and what remains is a deep, unshakable confidence, a knowing that you can walk through the storm and emerge stronger than before. Pain is the great sculptor of both the brain and the soul, carving strength into the very structure of who you are. Neuroscience reveals that the human nervous system does not merely endure pain, it adapts to it. Each experience of discomfort, whether physical or emotional, activates circuits in the brain that, if approached with the right mindset, lead to greater resilience. The anterior cingulate cortex, the insula, and the prefrontal cortex all work together to interpret and respond to pain, deciding whether it will weaken you or refine you. Most people, however, seek to avoid pain entirely, creating lives padded with comfort, unaware that in doing so, they rob themselves of the very experiences that forge endurance. When you view pain only as a curse, you miss its divine potential. Pain, especially when allowed to be framed by faith, becomes a messenger and a teacher. It exposes where you are still fragile, where your patience is thin, where your trust is shallow. In those moments of strain, the brain is being rewired, not in weakness, but in the strengthening of pathways that allow you to remain calm under pressure, steadfast under trial, and unbroken when storms rage. Just as the body builds muscle fibers through microtears, the mind and spirit build resilience through the microfractures of disappointment, betrayal, and loss. When embraced rather than fled from, pain creates a unique kind of clarity. It strips away illusions, burns away the excess, and forces you to confront the truth of who you are and what you stand upon. Spiritually, it often reveals the insufficiency of human strength alone, driving you into the deeper waters of trust in God's sustaining power. Neurologically, the repeated choice to endure difficulty with a steady heart strengthens the brain's capacity to regulate emotions, quiet panic, and maintain perspective. This is why some emerge from hardship with an unshakable peace. They have trained both their brain and their faith to interpret pain not as destruction, but as preparation. In a world obsessed with quick relief, to willingly face pain is countercultural. Yet it is in that choice that transformation happens. The furnace of affliction refines, and the brain's neuroplasticity ensures that each time you refuse to break, you increase your capacity to stand firm. Pain ceases to be a thief and becomes a craftsman, shaping a vessel that can carry more strength, more compassion, and more authority. Through this process, you are not merely surviving suffering. You are being forged into someone who cannot be easily moved, a living testimony that even in the fire, you can remain whole. Hope is not just a poetic idea. It is a biological force that shapes the architecture of your brain and the endurance of your spirit. When hope is present, the brain's reward pathways, particularly those involving dopamine, remain active even in the face of uncertainty and pain. This isn't shallow optimism. It's a deep, anchored expectation that the future holds meaning, even if the present feels unbearable. Without hope, the brain begins to close in on itself, reducing creativity, resilience, and the willingness to take steps forward. But with hope, the mind stays open, adaptive, and alert to opportunities, even in dark seasons. But quite surely, hope is more than a mindset. It's a lifeline that connects you to promises greater than your circumstances. It refuses to let today's trials define tomorrow's destiny. Just as the body cannot live long without oxygen, the soul cannot endure long without hope. And when hope is infused with faith, it becomes immovable because it rests not on fluctuating conditions, but on the unchanging character of God. In this way, hope becomes a shield, guarding your heart and mind against the corrosive effects of despair. The neuroscience of hope reveals something powerful. When you envision a better future with sincerity and conviction, your brain begins to prime itself for action. Neural networks associated with planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation light up, making it more likely you will take steps toward that future. This is why hopelessness is so paralyzing. It shuts down the very systems needed to move forward. But when you hold hope, even when evidence seems scarce, you are literally keeping your brain's motivational machinery alive and active. Hope also acts as a stabilizer in times of chaos. While fear narrows your vision, causing you to miss possibilities, hope expands it. Hope expands it. It allows you to see beyond the immediate threat and envision paths through it. And this doesn't happen in some detached, mystical way. It is rooted in the physical rewiring of your brain over time. Every act of choosing hope, every moment of standing on promises instead of panic, strengthens synaptic connections that make hope your default posture rather than an occasional visitor. In the end, hope is the defiance of despair. It is looking into the storm and knowing the sun still exists above the clouds. It is standing in the valley and believing the mountaintop is still ahead. And each time you choose to hold it, your brain is learning, your spirit is hardening in the best way, and your endurance is deepening until you become the kind of person who cannot be broken by what tries to crush you.